Next.js has changed some of the ways we used to develop with React and NodeJS by combining them and abstracting a lot of the manual configurations we had to do before in order to improve our apps. And now with Next.js, we can decide where our code is going to be rendered, dynamically import components, easily optimize images, and a lot more. And this also comes with a few challenges, because with every new tag that's been introduced, new problems occur. And in today's video, I'm going to be going over 3 easy to implement abstractions in Next.js and some of the 3 most common problems for Next.js projects. Next.js has a custom built API for implementing middlewares. You can add middlewares to authenticate users, change the request to response objects, and a lot more. Here's a quick example of how you can use middlewares in your application. We have a function that gets the request and the response. We can update the response body or the status however we see fit. What I don't like about Next.js middleware situation is they only allow one middleware per application. And if you want to divide your code and have different middlewares for different parts of your API, this can become very messy. What they recommend is abstracting the logic for the different middlewares you want and then combining them in one file, which will be the middleware, and you can choose which logic will go for which part of the API. It will look something like this. We have the middleware function, it has a request, and then in the request we can see the path name and return the respective middleware we want for that path. And as you can see, this can become very messy very fast, especially if you have a lot of different paths and you want a lot of different middlewares for those different paths. Like I've used middlewares in the past to validate the input, which is an easy way to just add the middleware in. If it's the same input for multiple API endpoints, that will just work for multiple places. But I guess the middleware in Next.js is made for one global middleware where you can do the logic for the whole API, like authenticating users or stuff that will affect all of the endpoints. And if you have specific logic for specific API endpoints, then you put that logic in the actual endpoint resolvers. Next.js also has their own way of dynamically importing components. Nowadays in React we have lazy loading components, but Next.js has come up with their own function to dynamically import components, which will ensure that these components are only imported when they are actually visible. Images can be a significant source of performance issues on your applications, especially on mobile devices. Next.js provides multiple ways to optimize your images for your websites. One of the things that they provide is a component called Next.image, which you can use to import your images into your website. And this component provides several features like lazy loading or responsive image sizing. And here is a quick example how you can use this component in your application. Basically import it from Next.image, and then you set the source, the alt text, the width, and the height. And what this will do is the image component will optimize your image and it will provide responsive sizing. And if you want lazy loading, you can set the loading prop to lazy. Okay, now on to some of the common mistakes in Next.js projects. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I've personally experienced is importing Node.js modules on the client side. Now, Next.js provides multiple ways to render your components, and there's packages that are Node.js modules that will only work on the API or the backend side of your website. For example, the FS module or package is a way to manipulate files on your server, and this will only work as a Node.js module on the backend or website, or it needs to be executed on the server. But if you import this in your client components, you're probably going to see an error, something like this. And Next.js is going to complain because you can't import Node.js modules on the client side. I understand this can be confusing and sometimes irritating, but these features that Next.js provides for where your code is rendered are very useful. We just need to be mindful of what's actually supported on the client components or the server components. Another common error that I've seen is hydration errors. But to really understand why this happens is we need to understand what hydration is. Hydration is when React converts the pre-rendered HTML from the server into a fully interactive application by adding event handlers. So this means that our HTML was pre-rendered on the server, and hydration errors happen when this is rendered on the client and the HTML is different. One of the reasons this can happen is if we have incorrect nesting in HTML, like a paragraph element being nested in another paragraph element, or having a div element nested into a paragraph element. And the reasons why these discrepancies between the server rendered HTML and the client side rendered HTML happen is because our browsers will actually render the HTML but change the incorrect nesting, and And that is when we have the difference between these two, and Next.js will complain that basically we have a hydration error. And there's other reasons why hydration errors happen, but the premise will be the same, that our server renders an HTML that's different from the client rendered HTML. And sometimes you also want to use client objects like document and window, which will be undefined while the server renders the HTML. And talking about the document or window objects, this is also the third common mistake that I've experienced with Next.js. And basically I've tried to use the window object before it was defined, and I would see an error message saying that window is not defined. And the reason why this happens is because the component trying to access the window object is rendered before the window object is actually defined. And the way to get around this is to access the window object in a use effect, basically ensuring that it will be accessed once the component is mounted. Expect more Next.js videos in the future, and subscribe if you wanna see them and be notified. Click the notification bell. And if you like this video, click the like button, tell the algorithm you loved it so it can show it to more people. And that's been it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. Happy coding. Bye.